Well, now we have our two UV maps ready to go for our coffee table. If we come over here to the materials panel and we select the wood and choose select in edit mode, we get our UV map for the wood. And if we then deselect that and select the tabletop and select that, we get the UV map for the top there. Let's take each of these out into Photoshop and texture them. So I'll come down here to UVs, go to Export UV Layout, browse to my Textures folder, and here we'll call this, we'll create a new folder and we'll call this Coffee Table. And in here we'll put our Coffee Table Top UVs right there. And notice that this is at 1024. I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 1024 by 1024 for now. We can always save out of Photoshop at a smaller resolution if needed, but I'll go ahead and export that out. Now I can deselect this, select the material of the wood, select that, and let's go ahead and export these out as well. Export UV Layout, 1024. Let's put it in our Textures Coffee Table. And we'll put this, we'll call this Coffee Table Wood underscore UVs. All right, so now we have that exported out so we can open it in Photoshop. Here in Photoshop, I'll just go to File, Open, and I'll browse to that Textures folder. Here's my coffee table. I'll go ahead and open up both of these. Open. And there we go. So now let's work on the wood one here since we have that up. I'll just press Z and drag to zoom in. I'll change this layer over here to call it UVs so we know what that is. And now it's time for us to find a wood grain texture. So we can go to Google Images and see if we can find wood grain texture seamless. Let's try that. Not too bad. I'm going to click on Search Tools, go to Size and Large. And I want something more like this. That's not bad. This isn't bad. Yeah, let me try something like this. So now I'm going to press Controller Command A, Controller Command C to copy. And I'll come over here to the wood UVs and paste it with Controller Command V. I'll drag that down beneath the UVs, hit the V key to go to my transform tool. I'm going to click up here to show transform control so I can see the little handles here and press shift and click and drag and move this down like this. So maybe if I do something like this, that wood grain might be small enough for this. Yeah, let's try that. So I'll hit my transform tool, Alt, Shift, and click, and I'll begin going through the process of copying, snapping, moving over 1 pixel to try and build up the wood grain for this UV map. And with all of these selected, I'll do the same thing with Alt, Shift, bring down, snap, and move it up a pixel. Same down here. And just fill this whole thing with wood grain. All right. So now you can see that I've got all the wood grain going in the same direction, which was easy. And that's why I aligned all of the UV islands up and down so I could do that. So before we collapse all these down or merge all the layers, let's test it out and make sure it looks okay. So I can come up here to File, Export, and Export As, or once again, Shift, Alt, Controller Command W. So I'll do that. And let's export this out. And let's call this Coffee Table Wood underscore C for color map. And let's test it out. So I'll go over to Blender here. And for the material for the wood up here in the node editor, I'll press Shift A. I'll choose texture and image texture. And I'll click open and I'll browse to find that color map. There it is, _C. Let's come down here and select the texture viewport shading. And let's see how we did. Yeah, that's not too bad. That looks sufficiently cheap. And that's what I'm going for here. But it looks a little too clean. So yes, I'm going to find one of my grunge maps and layer it on top of that, because that's just too plain. Let's go back to Photoshop. And let me open up one of my grunge maps. I've got a few here, so let's take a look. Yeah, I used that one earlier. That's not bad, and it has kind of a wood grain quality to it. That's not bad. Let me go with this one here. That, for some reason, speaks to me. Controller Command A, Controller Command C. Let's go back to the wood, and I'll paste it. I'll turn on the UV islands here, and let's maybe bring this down a bit. It's kind of big, you can see. I'm going to bring this down, do something. Maybe I'll just try and, once again, put it over the whole thing. Let's try this. Sometimes this just works. I'll change the blending mode to multiply, and I'll reduce the opacity. Yeah, let's try that. Okay, let's try that. I'm going to save. And for this, I'm going to save it as a PSD once again, and I'm going to just remove these here. So I'll save it as Coffee Table Wood PSD. There we go. And now I'll go and export it out right here, export as, save it again, overwrite it, and let's come back to Blender and reopen it. Now, when we do this using Unity, it's going to be easier because Unity actually auto updates when you bring in or when you replace a file. So here we go. That's not too bad. It's looking a little grungier. Yeah, I think for now I'll go with that. All right, so now we need the top to be kind of a Formica finish. Let's go back to Photoshop and take a look at that other UV map. All right, over here, let's take a look at this one. Now this is the tabletop. Let's go through the same process, call this UVs. And for this, let's see if we can find another material that looks kind of like what I'm after. So here I've searched for Formica seamless textures just to see what I come up with. I'm not seeing much that I like. Here we go. This is something that I'm kind of looking for. This kind of very faint texture to it. Yeah, I think I want to go with this. Here it is opened up in Photoshop. I'll copy it just like we did before and paste it in here. I'll drag it down beneath the UVs and let's scale it down so it fits on here. There we go. So Alt Shift, click and drag, snap, and do it one more time here. All right, so let's test this out. I think I'm going to want a little bit more dirt on it and maybe some stains, but let's test this out and see how it looks. There's a repeatable pattern right here, or a visible repetition that I'm not fond of right here. We might need to take care of that. I think what I'll do is I will hit the I key to sample and then come over to the brush tool, and let's go ahead and combine these layers over here with Control or Command E. And now with my brush tool, I'll change it to something that has a soft edge to it. And let me increase the size a bit. It's at opacity 100. Let's take this down to 50%. To do that, you can just hit the 5 key on the keyboard for opacity and Shift 5 for flow. And then I'll just come in here and begin kind of breaking up the pattern just a little bit so it doesn't look quite so continuous or repetitive. All right, there we go. So let's test this out. Let's go to export, and we'll export this one out as well. So these are just tests right now. We'll clean these up here in a minute. Let me go back to Blender, and let's select this material, the tabletop, and let's, in the node editor, bring our texture in here with Shift-A, texture, image texture, open, and here is the coffee table top. And there we go. So yeah, I think that's going to work pretty well. What I want to do, though, is to create a few stains on the top here. All right, so I've opened these up in Photoshop. Let's go ahead and copy them and take them over to that tabletop. And they're kind of big, which is fine. I'll shrink this down a bit. Let's see if we can put this in place and kind of blend it in. So maybe a coffee cup would be about this big, let's say. And now what I can do is come in and reduce the opacity a bit. I could try and change it to multiply, but I don't think that's going to really help. A linear burn, let's see. No, that's a little too much. So I'll just take the opacity down, something like that. And then let's come in with the erase tool. And once again, I've got the opacity at 50 and the flow at 50. And I'm just going to kind of erase the edges around here a bit. And I'm also going to come in and take this stained one, that one that I thought maybe might work well just over the whole thing. Put that underneath here. And let's see if we can put that over the whole thing. I'll turn the UVs back on. Let's drag that over the whole thing just to get a general state of nastiness over that. And let's reduce the opacity a bit. Something like that. And then we can come back and work with this. I'll increase the opacity just a little bit here so it looks kind of gross. And then maybe come back with the erase tool and try and get rid of some of those edges there. All right. Let's bring in that other coffee mug stain here. And for this one, maybe I'll put it over on the other side. All right, so now that we have our texture map done here in Photoshop, let's go ahead and clean up these UV maps. What let's do is go to the magic wand tool over here, or the W key, and I'm going to select the UVs layer. Click to select everything around the UV island. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and maybe bring it back 2 pixels or so. I can take all of these and merge them down into one layer, and I think actually what I'm going to do is, just to be safe, I'm going to select all of these and press Alt and click and copy these, and then press Control or Command E to then collapse them all. So now I can hide these. These are my original layers, and if I ever want to come back here and modify it, I can do that here. Now I can select these and put them in a group or a folder, and I can just call these originals. There you go. So just so I don't lose what I've done. Now that I have this and the UVs, or the outside of the UV islands selected, I'll just delete that. Control or Command D to deselect. Create a new layer. Make sure it's black. Hit G for the bucket tool and put that back there. So now we have a texture map for the top. Export it out. And there we go. Now let's come over here to this one. Let's go ahead and select the UVs, hit the W key, and select outside the UV islands. I will contract these with Select, Modify, Contract. 2 pixels. Now I'm going to go ahead and take all of these and collapse them down. I don't think I need all of those, so Control Command E. And we'll call this wood. We'll call this layer grunge. And now I can select the grunge layer and hit delete. The wood layer, hit delete. And then create a new layer behind all of this. Hit G for the paint. Bucket tool, Control Command D to deselect everything. And paint right back there on that back layer. So now there are our texture maps. So let's export this one out too. And this is the wood, right? The wood color. All right, let's do that. And replace. There we go. Let's go back to Blender and see how it looks. Here we are. I will go ahead and replace this one with the coffee table top. Ooh, that looks disgusting. I like it. And I'll go ahead and replace the bottom one, the wood here, with our cleaned up texture right here. And there we go. So there we have our textured coffee table. What we'll do next is take it into Unity and see if the materials look any different than we had before with the couch.